Our panel now. Mark Glaze, the director of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, MSNBC political analyst Karen Finney, and Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat from California. Karen, let me start with you. The NRA spent a week saying nothing about the Sandy Hook massacre, and boy, did they break their silence today. As someone who's been in the trenches fighting this group for many years, can you tell us, are people going to be more or less scared of the NRA following this so-called press conference? Because by all measures, it was a complete disaster.
It was a disaster. I think those who take a lot of money from the NRA are probably scratching their heads, rethinking how they're where they could get other dollars, because actually my read of that press conference was that it would further galvanize support for the kind of common sense measures that we've been talking about, because he was so, Lapierre was so just disconnected from reality. I mean, I worked in New York City public schools. The idea of putting armed guards in schools is not even worth treating as a serious idea. It was so sort of out of step with where I think the conversation has been, the level of respect and the kind of conversation that we've been having nationally, that I would almost guarantee you that it has done more actually to help our cause than any one of us could have done.
No doubt. And to your point, of course, studies have been done. The greater amount of guns are in a particular jurisdiction, the greater likelihood that homicide will occur and that some violence will be sparked off. And so it's a pretty ludicrous ideal. Mark, Franklin Roosevelt, in one of his famous fireside chats, said that all we have to fear is fear itself. He was speaking about the looming terror of an approaching enemy from the outside, but this seems to be something from the inside. It seems like fear itself is the only thing that Wayne Lapierre has to offer. Let's take a listen to this.
Violent crime is increasing again for the first time in 19 years. Add another hurricane, terrorist attack, or some other natural or man-made disaster, and you've got a recipe for a national nightmare of violence and victimization.
Mark, can Wayne Lapierre get the NRA out of the fix it's in by scaring people into thinking that all we need is guns, that guns are the answer to every particular catastrophe that we confront in this country?
You know, I must admit, I've been a student of the NRA for a long time. My dad was a gun dealer in Colorado, knew lots of NRA members, and I have to say I was surprised by what happened today. You know, his comments were, first of all, factually incoherent. And struck me as being so politically tone-deaf that it kind of left me wondering where this impression came from that the NRA was a political powerhouse. I think that they have a real problem on their hands. And part of the reason they have a problem on their hands is that, in fact, the average NRA member who's a hunter or somebody who wants to defend themselves in their home is quite mainstream in their views about what we need to do. We had a Republican pollster, Frank Luntz, poll NRA members and gun owners, and he found that, for example, 74% of NRA members think everybody should pass a criminal background check before they get a gun. That's something Wayne Lapierre opposes. So as we have this discussion, let's not confuse NRA members, who are right there in the middle of the country, and the NRA's leadership, whose principal product is fear.
Yeah, but I want to turn to Representative Schiff. Just like earlier, John Boehner said, look, the perception that the president was out here with a desire to raise taxes on everybody made it less likely that we could negotiate the fiscal cliff. The perception here is that the NRA is out of step with the mainstream of America. New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg issued a statement following the so-called press conference today. He says, quote, today the NRA's lobbyists blamed everyone but themselves for the crisis of gun violence. While they promote armed guards, they continue to oppose the most basic and common sense steps we can take to save lives, not only in schools, but in our movie theaters, malls, and streets. Enough. As a country, we must rise above special interest politics. What's your response to that, Congressman Schiff?
Well, I think Mayor Bloomberg is exactly right. The answer is not to put armed guards in our kindergarten classes and our middle schools and high schools, our universities, our shopping malls. It just makes no sense whatsoever, and I think that the news conference today had people scratching their heads, really appalled at what they heard the spokesman for the NRA say, and plainly there's nothing constructive coming out of that leadership. The leadership of that organization is not only out of step with the country, but as Mark pointed out, they're out of step with their own members. And I think it will serve to galvanize those that are supporting gun control legislation. I think it is another shot in the arm. And I would expect to see in January some very strong legislation on the assault weapons on extended ammunition clips, on the gun show loopholes, move in the Congress, and I think that the NRA demonstrated today it doesn't represent anyone but itself, a narrow group of the leadership.
Right. Karen, let me bring you in. Look, in that meandering morass of a message, if you can call it that, the main point which Mr. LaPierre was expressing today seemed to be this idea of putting an armed guard or community watch person in every school in the country. It's ironic that Wayne LaPierre's solution to the problem of gun violence is to create an army of George Zimmermans who will be armed to defend their own particular bias or perspective?
Well, not to mention that it was the NRA that was opposed to putting more cops on the street back during the Clinton administration. So, I mean, let's go to the irony there. I mean, look, here's part of the larger problem that I think both the conservative movement, frankly, writ large, as well as, you know, the sort of gun movement is facing. Their arguments no longer stack up. I mean, you had LaPierre talking about the fact, saying we need a database to track people with mental illness when they have been the principal people standing in the way of us having the kind of database that could have told police officers in Aurora, Colorado, that they had somebody who was not only amassing a number of weapons, but ammunition. I mean, they are the one. We don't have a kind of rational national database. I can't buy Sudafed one day sooner. That's how close they track the purchase of Sudafed. But you could go online and buy a gun. And the last thing I'll say, you know, a friend of mine who is about to be redeployed for a 5th time to Afghanistan looked at a picture of that assault rifle and said, you know, that's the gun I carry in Afghanistan.
Wow.
What is this woman doing with that in Connecticut?
Absolutely. Well, we're Sudafed up with all of that madness. Let's turn to Mark. You've been, in light of what Karen Finney just said, I mean, the NRA seems to stand for no rationale or no rationality allowed. You've been fighting the NRA for a long time. They've been tough opponents. But here they are today saying, quote, we need security guards in schools, end of quote. Well, don't they know that there actually was a policeman, a sheriff's deputy at Columbine on the day of the tragic shooting at that school, and it did little good there. They were, the security guard returned fire, but they were not able to stop people who are superiorly armed.
That's exactly right. You know, I'm from Colorado. We all sort of lived through Columbine, and there was not just one sheriff's deputy there, but there was another security guard very nearby who immediately came to the scene. You know, it defies common sense, and any survivor of that kind of mass shooting, and we work with them all the time, and any police officer will tell you that putting more guns in the hands of more people in a tense scene where bullets are flying does not make people more safe. What makes people more safe is to make sure that guns, which we have a right to and should continue to have a right to with reasonable restrictions, don't fall into the wrong hands. But for the NRA, which, let's be frank, helped create this problem of letting more and more guns into the stream of illegal commerce, into the secondary market for crime guns, to now say, wait, there are so many guns in the criminal market that the only way to protect ourselves from criminals is to give everybody a gun in the preschool is simply absurd.
Congressman, very quickly, is this going to be bluster and blather? Is this much ado about nothing? We're wringing our hands, we're going to hang our heads low, and then we're going to go on with business as usual? Can anything get done?
Yes, it can get done, and it really has to get done, and the American people have to hold their representatives accountable. This can't be yet another horrible incident that raises some protest at the time and then dissipates and ends up with no progress. We have got to take action this time. But, you know, I've been in Congress for 12 years. I have never seen the kind of momentum over the last few days. And I think that this momentum will turn into a productive result. I think it will lead to meaningful gun legislation. I think it will lead to a stronger assault weapons ban than we've had in the past. And I think that will be a significant piece of the puzzle. There's going to be a broader solution as well, and we have to bring everyone to the table. But this is an important step, and I think we can take it, and we have to.
All right, from your mouth to Congress's ears. Our thanks to Karen Finney, Mark Glaze, and Representative Adam Schiff. Next, Boehner